Story 1. Story 1, The Whisper of the White. The crisp mountain air bit at my exposed cheeks, stinging them a rosy red. My breath plumed out in ghostly puffs as I adjusted my goggles. The sun, a blinding disk in the azure sky, glinted off the pristine slopes of Mammoth Mountain. It was a perfect day for skiing. Perfect, until it wasn't. Ready for the backcountry, Lena? Mark, my fiancé, grinned, his eyes crinkling at the corners. Born ready, I replied, my voice muffled by the fleece lining my helmet. The thrill of untouched powder beckoned. We'd skied Mammoth countless times, but this was our first venture beyond the marked trails. Mark, ever the adventurer, had researched a secluded bowl promising untracked snow. He'd shown me the topo maps, assured me it was safe. The initial descent was exhilarating. The untouched snow billowed around us like clouds, the only sounds the rhythmic swish of our skis and our excited whoops. But as we ventured deeper, a subtle shift occurred. The playful sunlight seemed to dim, swallowed by the encroaching shadows of the towering pines. The air grew colder, a biting, unnatural chill that seeped into my bones. Getting a little spooky back here, huh? I called out to Mark, trying to keep my voice light. He didn't reply. I glanced back, my heart lurching. He was gone. Panic, icy and sharp, clawed at my throat. Mark! I shouted, my voice echoing unnervingly in the sudden silence. Where are you? No answer. Only the whisper of the wind through the trees, a sound that now seemed sinister, mocking. I retraced my path, my heart hammering against my ribs. The snow, once pristine, now seemed to hold a malevolent stillness. A strange, unsettling feeling prickled at the back of my neck, as if I were being watched. Mark! I yelled again, my voice cracking with fear. Then, I heard it. A low growl, guttural and inhuman, resonated from the dense trees lining the bowl. It wasn't the growl of a bear or a mountain lion. It was something else, something ancient. My blood ran cold. I fumbled for my phone, my hands trembling so violently I almost dropped it. No signal. Of course. The growl came again, closer this time. I spun around, my eyes darting frantically through the trees. The shadows seemed to deepen, coalescing into monstrous shapes. I couldn't see anything, but I could feel it. Something was out there, watching me, hunting me. Terror lent me speed. I turned and skied blindly, my skis carving erratic tracks in the virgin snow. I had to get out, had to find Mark, had to escape whatever lurked in the shadows. The growl pursued me, relentless, growing louder with each panicked breath I took. I risked a glance over my shoulder. Movement. Something large and dark shifting between the trees. I couldn't make out its shape, but the sheer size of it sent a wave of nausea through me. I pushed myself harder, my muscles screaming in protest. The trees blurred past in a dizzying rush. I had to reach the marked trails, had to find civilization, had to. Suddenly, my skis caught on something hidden beneath the snow. I pitched forward, tumbling head over heels, the world a blur of white and pain. I landed hard, the air knocked from my lungs. My skis lay several feet away, broken and useless. I tried to stand, but a sharp pain shot through my ankle. I'd twisted it badly. The growling stopped. The silence that followed was even more terrifying. I knew it was close. I could feel its presence, a heavy, oppressive weight in the air. The scent of pine and snow was overlaid by something else, something acrid and foul, like rotting flesh. Slowly, I turned my head. Through the trees, I saw it. It was huge, towering over me, its form indistinct in the fading light. It was a mass of dark fur and muscle, its limbs thick and gnarled. Its head was lowered, sniffing the air, its breath clouding in the frigid air. Its eyes, two glowing embers in the darkness, fixed on me. I whimpered, a small, pathetic sound lost in the vastness of the mountains. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. I could only wait, paralyzed by terror, as the creature stalked towards me. Then, just as it was about to reach me, it stopped. It tilted its head, as if listening to something. A faint sound, carried on the wind, reached my ears. A human voice. "Mark?" The creature turned its massive head, its glowing eyes fixed on something beyond the trees. It let out a low growl, a sound of frustration, and then, with a speed that belied its size, it turned and vanished into the forest. I lay there, trembling, my breath ragged, my mind reeling. What was that thing? Where was Mark? Had he called it? Had he controlled it? The sound of skis cutting through the snow broke the silence. I looked up and saw Mark, his face pale and drawn, standing over me. "Lena! Are you okay?" His voice was strained, his eyes wide with a fear I'd never seen before. He didn't mention the creature, didn't offer an explanation. He simply helped me to my feet, his touch strangely cold, and guided me back towards the marked trails. We skied in silence, the oppressive presence of the creature still lingering in the air. I wanted to ask him, wanted to know what he had seen, what he had heard, what he had done. But the fear in his eyes silenced me. We reached the bottom of the mountain, the lights of the lodge a welcome sight. As we loaded our gear into the car, I finally found my voice. "Mark," I whispered, "what was that?" He turned to me, his face etched with a mixture of fear and something else. Something I couldn't quite place. He opened his mouth to speak, but then hesitated, a strange, almost imperceptible flicker in his eyes. "Just a bear," he said finally, his voice flat and emotionless. "Just a bear." But I knew it wasn't a bear. And I knew, with a chilling certainty, that Mark wasn't telling me the truth. And something in his silence, in the haunted look in his eyes, terrified me more than the monster in the woods. Something had changed in the shadows of the mountain, something that clung to us, something that whispered in the wind. And I knew, with a dread that settled deep in my bones, that we would never truly escape the whisper of the white. Story 2. Story 2, The Weeping Slopes. The crisp, invigorating air whipped against my face, stinging my cheeks. Sunlight glinted off the pristine snow, a dazzling, almost painful white. It was a perfect day for skiing in the French Alps, the kind of day that made you feel alive. My boyfriend, Liam, was already halfway down the slope, a blur of vibrant blue against the stark landscape. He whooped with joy, the sound echoing faintly across the vast expanse of white. I grinned, pushing off and following him down. We were staying in a small, rustic chalet nestled at the base of Mont Blanc. It was off-season, meaning we had the slopes practically to ourselves. Blissful solitude. Also, I thought. It started subtly. A faint, high-pitched whine, like metal scraping against metal, only softer, almost organic. I dismissed it as the wind whistling through the trees, a trick of the altitude. But the whine persisted, growing in intensity, burrowing into my skull. And then came the smell. Faint at first, a sickly sweet undercurrent to the fresh mountain air. It smelled of decay, of something putrid, hidden beneath the snow. "Liam?" I shouted, my voice swallowed by the immensity of the mountains. He was too far ahead, a tiny figure disappearing around a bend. I felt a knot of unease tighten in my stomach. The snow beneath my skis felt different. Less solid. Spongy. I stopped, my heart hammering against my ribs. I looked down. The pristine white was marred by patches of a sickly grey-green. I leaned closer, my breath catching in my throat. The snow was moving. Pulverized. Rippling like the surface of a stagnant pond. The whining was louder now, a piercing shriek that made my teeth ache. I looked up, frantically scanning the slopes. Nothing. Just the endless expanse of white. And the smell. God, the smell. It was overwhelming now, cloying, suffocating. It clung to the back of my throat, the taste of rotten iron heavy on my tongue. Then I saw it. A flicker of movement at the edge of the tree line. Something dark, sinuous, weaving between the trees. Too quick to make out clearly. Too wrong. My stomach lurched. I wanted to scream, to run, but my legs felt like lead. I forced myself to move, pushing off and skiing towards Liam. The whining intensified, the smell thickened. The snow felt like slush beneath my skis, slowing me down, dragging at me. I felt like I was sinking, drowning in the corrupted white. Finally, I rounded the bend. Liam was standing at the edge of a sheer drop, staring down into the valley below. He didn't turn when I called his name. Liam! I shouted again, my voice cracking with fear. He slowly turned, and I gasped. His face, it wasn't his face. The skin was stretched taut, almost translucent, revealing the pulsing network of veins beneath. His eyes were huge, black, devoid of pupils. And from his mouth, a thick, viscous fluid oozed, dripping onto the snow, staining it the same sickly grey-green. He smiled, a grotesque parody of a smile that stretched his lips into a thin, bloodless line. The fluid dripped faster, pooling around his feet. And then, he spoke. His voice wasn't his own. It was a guttural rasp, a wet, gurgling sound that seemed to come from deep within his chest. The slopes weep, he said, the fluid bubbling from his lips. And they hunger. He reached out a hand, his fingers elongated, gnarled, tipped with something that looked like bone, but wasn't. The skin on his hand shimmered, rippled, as if something was moving beneath it. I stumbled back, my skis catching on a patch of the pulsating snow. I fell, the cold seeping into my clothes. I looked up at Liam, at the thing that wore his face, and I knew, with a chilling certainty, that I was alone. Utterly, terrifyingly alone. He took a step towards me, the fluid dripping from his mouth, his eyes fixed on mine. And then, the whining stopped. Replaced by a low, guttural growl, echoing from the mountains, from the snow, from everywhere. I scrambled back, trying to get away, but the snow held me fast, pulling me down, sucking me into its corrupted embrace. I looked back at Liam, his distorted face looming over me, and I saw the snow around him begin to recede, revealing something beneath. Something dark, pulsating, and vast. The last thing I saw was his smile widening, revealing rows of needle-sharp teeth, stained red with the weeping of the slopes. Then, darkness. And the faint, sickening smell of decay. And a deep, resonating hum that vibrated through the earth, through my bones, through everything. I don't know how long I've been here. I don't know if Liam is still Liam. I don't know what's beneath the snow. I only know that the slopes weep. And they are hungry. And I'm still here, somewhere beneath the snow, waiting. Story 3. Story 3, The Whispering Pines. The crisp mountain air bit at my cheeks, a welcome sting against the exertion of hauling my skis toward the lift. My breath plumed before me, ghosting into the sharp blue of the Colorado sky. This annual ski trip with Sarah was our ritual, a necessary escape from city life. This year, we'd opted for a smaller, less crowded resort, Silver Creek Lodge, nestled deep in the San Juan Mountains. The solitude was almost unnerving. Ready for the Black Diamond, slow poke? Sarah's voice, amplified by the echoing slopes, jolted me back to the present. She was already perched on the lift chair, a mischievous glint in her eye. Just admiring the scenery, I lied, my heart already hammering a nervous rhythm against my ribs. Black diamonds were more her forte than mine. The ascent was unnervingly quiet. The usual chatter of fellow skiers was absent. The only sound was the rhythmic creak of the lift cables and the whispering wind sighing through the dense pines that crowded the mountainside. A strange sense of unease settled over me, a prickling sensation at the back of my neck. I glanced over at Sarah, but she seemed oblivious, her gaze fixed on the summit. As we neared the top, the wind picked up, swirling around us in icy gusts. The whispers in the pines seemed to intensify, morphing into something more pointed. A low murmuring, almost like voices, slithered through the air. "Did you hear that?" I asked Sarah, my voice barely a whisper. She frowned, shaking her head. "Hear what? The wind?" "No, it sounded like voices." Sarah gave me a concerned look. You're imagining things. It's the altitude. Come on, let's go. We disembarked and stood at the edge of the run, a sheer drop of pristine white plunging into the forested valley below. The whispering persisted, a constant hum beneath the wind's howl. My stomach churned. Let's stick together, I said, trying to sound casual. Sarah smiled reassuringly. Always do. We pushed off, the familiar rush of adrenaline momentarily eclipsing the unease. But as we descended, the whispers grew louder, weaving themselves into the rhythm of our skis on the snow. They seemed to be coming from the trees, a chorus of sibilant murmurs circling us. I glanced at the trees, half expecting to see something, someone, watching us. But there was nothing. Only the dense, dark pines, their branches laden with snow. Suddenly, Sarah lost control, her skis catching an edge. I watched in horror as she tumbled down the slope, a flurry of blue and white against the stark landscape. The whispers seemed to surge, a crescendo of sound, almost triumphant. Sarah! I screamed, racing down after her. I found her a few hundred yards down, thankfully unharmed. I'm okay, she gasped, brushing snow from her face. Just a bit shaken. But as she stood up, I saw it, a single, perfect line of footprints leading away from her, disappearing into the dense trees lining the run. They weren't ours. What the? I muttered, pointing at the tracks. Sarah followed my gaze, her eyes widening. But there's no one else up here. We followed the tracks, an unspoken fear gripping us both. They led deeper into the woods, away from the marked run, into the silent, snow-laden heart of the mountain. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, surrounding us like a suffocating blanket. The tracks ended abruptly at the base of a towering pine, its branches reaching skyward like skeletal fingers. Carved into the bark, a single word, leave. We stared at the carving, a chilling silence descending between us. The whispering ceased. The only sound was the hammering of our hearts. Suddenly, a branch snapped behind us. We whirled around, our breath caught in our throats. There was nothing there. Just the endless rows of silent, watchful pines. We need to go, Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. We didn't speak as we retraced our steps, our eyes darting nervously around us. The silence felt heavier now, pregnant with unseen presence. We reached the edge of the woods and rejoined the run, the familiar sounds of the resort seeming miles away. We skied down the rest of the mountain in stunned silence, the unsettling memory of the whispering pines and the mysterious footprints etched in our minds. We didn't mention it again. Back at the lodge, surrounded by the chatter of other skiers, the experience felt like a feverish dream. But the unease lingered, a cold knot in my stomach. As we packed our bags to leave, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Driving away from Silver Creek Lodge, I glanced back at the mountain, its snow-capped peak shrouded in gathering dusk. The setting sun cast long, eerie shadows across the slopes, making the trees look like dark, menacing figures. And as we rounded the final bend, I could have sworn I heard it again, the faintest whisper, carried on the wind, a chilling reminder of the secret hidden in the heart of the whispering pines. We haven't been skiing since. Sometimes, in the quiet of the night, I hear it again, that faint whispering, just on the edge of hearing. And I wonder what would have happened if we hadn't heeded the warning carved into that ancient pine. What waited for us in the silent depths of the mountain? And is it still waiting?